Hello everyone, this is Darion of GNB Productions, and today we're going to be taking a look at the classic / newly released Sonic X Shadow Generations. Sonic X Shadow Generations released in October of 2024. The game houses a package deal with a remaster. You see, kids, the text on the screen with the little quotation marks around it is what we in the business like to call foreshadowing. A remaster of the hit Sonic Generations, as well as an all-original Shadow Generations game. Well, as original as you can get with venturing to past locations. The game centered around the titular hedgehogs getting thrust into a void devoid of time. Sonic teaming up with his past self to remedy this by venturing through Sonic's history, and Shadow diving into his history and facing every ounce of trauma he's ever had, basically. When this game was announced, I was ecstatic. Not only do I get the chance to revisit one of the best games in the series, I also get a whole new game centered around my favorite character packaged right next to it. This is one of the few times when leading up to a game's release where there was almost minimal skepticism and pushback. The game just looked solid, and now that it's released, how does it fare? And yes, dear viewer, I am going to pretend you didn't see the title or thumbnail and wait to answer that at the end of the video. Considering that I have yet to review Sonic Generations on the channel, I just feel like it'd be right if I reviewed that game, as well as the whole remaster aspect of it all, before moving on to what we're all really here to talk about. And don't you even dare think about skipping through the timestamps and shit, because trust me, I'll know. Anyway, let's get into Sonic Generations. Sonic Gens is a game I hold near and dear to my heart. It was the third or fourth game I played after just recently getting into the series when I was a kid. And all these years later, I'm glad I have a proper chance to gush about it. Sonic Generations is the third addition to the boost style of Sonic gameplay. Introduced in Sonic Rush and evolved into Sonic Unleashed in Colors, Generations continues the trend. But this time with the gimmick of Sonic teaming up with his past self to embark on a nostalgic 2D and 3D venture that surely is going to become annoying in the following years. Conceptually, this is something that in the years since I've personally grown less fond of. Treating these Sonics like two different entities is just kinda lame to me, but I'll go more in detail with that when I actually talk about the story. The gameplay of Sonic Gens is split between the classic 2D style of Sonic gameplay, akin to Sonic 1, 2, 3, CD, etc., and the modern boost style brought back from Unleashed in Colors, like I mentioned. The gameplay of Sonic Gens still holds up to be pretty damn solid. To start off with classic Sonic, while noticeably different than how he'd feel in those older games, still handles pretty well. Most notable thing about him is this broken-ass spin dash that'll send you hurtling at light speed. The way the levels are designed work for it, but I don't really think this matched that well with the classic gameplay, especially as it's executed by just holding the button instead of rapidly pressing and charging it up. His physics as well seem pretty off too. I don't know if this is just a thing in the remaster or if it's in the OG and I just can't remember. But there is a noticeable lack of smoothness when it comes to stuff like the rolling physics. Not to the point where it hinders the experience for me, but it's extremely noticeable. Especially with me coming off of the most refined examples of this gameplay style, like Mania and Superstars. Nevertheless, classic Sonic was pretty fun to control in this. This does feel like a pretty serviceable evolution of the classic formula, physics-wise I'd say. But it doesn't stop there. The level design for these stages are also phenomenal. Something I love about Sonic games, especially the 2D ones like Sonic 3 and K, or Mania for this specific example, is how the levels are often designed with many methods to approach them. My favorite type of Sonic level design is where you have the capability to venture onto cool alternate paths that provide a different experience when replaying them. And Generations has that in fucking spades. In a weird way, the level design is pretty reminiscent of both Sonic 2 and 3 and K, in that it prioritizes high-octane speed, yet encourages exploration and finding alternate routes. The typical design philosophy of high, middle, and low paths translating to easy but hard to maintain, normal, and slower and harder route will never get old to me, and this game did a great job translating it. Classic gameplay is just really solid. It's crazy to think that even the weaker part of the overall gameplay styles could still be thoroughly enjoyed. The modern Sonic side of this is absolutely fucking phenomenal. Not perfect, however, because, and this is a problem with all boost games back then, whenever he's not boosting, he feels very sluggish and tanky, which more often than not isn't a major problem, but it does become one when trying to do stuff like precise platforming and such. Again, not a major issue, as for a majority of the game you're going to be blazing at hyperspeed, but for the few moments when you are trying to do precise movements and turns, it can get pretty frustrating. The ultimate price for me playing Shadow Gens before going back to Sonic Gens is being absolutely ass at a game I've played numerous times already. Because the control schemes have elevated significantly from since Sonic Gens originally released, and going back to it after playing Shadow Gens has put me through a bit of an unexpected learning curve. The boost gameplay, as I said, was a friggin' blast. A philosophy of the boost formula I have missed for quite a while is the obstacle aspect. This game and Unleashed before it really set a precedent for how this formula should be treated, and it's a shame that later games don't follow through. Having all of Sonic's speed at your disposal and learning how to use and control it is fucking genius, man. This game thrives on replay value, as you're encouraged to get better and more familiar with the levels and routes, so you can effortlessly breeze through them just like Sonic can. The level design as well is just fantastic. The modern stages in Gens are easily some of the best designed 3D levels in the series in my opinion, with, like I said, tons of cool and unique pathways for you to explore. I don't like to keep repeating myself, but I love when these games do this as it makes the stage and the world seem more alive. Like I'm on an actual adventure going through these places. Modern Sonic gameplay was absolutely incredible. The absolute peak of boost gameplay if you ask me. I feel like now is a proper time for me to go over the actual levels now. The way Sonic Gens is structured is that you'll be going through 3 levels corresponding to the various eras of Sonic games. Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary from Sonic's 1, 2, and 3K, representing the classic era, Speed Highway, City Escape, and Seaside Hill from Sonic Adventure 2, and Sonic Heroes, representing the Adventure era, and finally, Crisis City, Rooftop Run, and Planet Wisp, oh fuck me, from Sonic 06, Sonic Unleashed, and Sonic Colors, representing the newer modern era, all being a sort of best hits for the Sonic series. And in between the eras, you have different bosses corresponding to those said eras. To briefly go over the levels for a bit, Green Hill as a pick from Sonic 1 fits well as being the first level in the series, and when it comes to the classic stage, it brilliantly captures the feel of the old stage. That, and I just love how the game plops you into it right at the beginning. And for the modern stage, it did a brilliant job translating it into 3D. You know, before we all eventually got sick of seeing it. And like I mentioned before, it offered some pretty cool hidden routes too. Notably the bridge you can smash through to take a quicker route to the goal. Chemical Plant was also just as fun with this fun little water slide mechanic and stuff. Real good fun for the classic and modern sides. Sky Sanctuary is the point where I think they really hit it off with the classic gameplay here, because it's at this point where they get real creative with it being in 2.5D and play around with the backgrounds and such in pretty cool ways. Not to mention, there were plenty of alt paths to explore. Martin's as well was pretty damn solid. Speed Highway was a fucking blast, and pretty damn interesting. Namely for the fact that it's the first 3D stage to be translated into 2D, and it frickin' rocked. Getting to roam through this hotel was really cool, and Moderns was of course a ton of fun, and had a bunch of cool hidden routes. Like the cool little parking garage, or cutting through some of the other buildings and stuff like that. Or my favorite, if you're fast enough to latch onto it, this helicopter that'll get you to a little shortcut, which is pretty cool. And they even do a cool homage to the shot of Sonic running down the building, which is nice. City Escape was freaking amazing. The modern stage to me did a decent job recapturing the feel of the stage from SA2, with a few exceptions. This is one of the stages where I can really feel how stiff and tanky he is to control without boosting, mainly because of the few bits where it's not required. But the truck chase was still sick as hell, especially when they actually add in a surprise for old players and have it pop out fucking saw blades. Jesus, Gun, all he did was steal a fucking emerald. Isn't this a bit overkill? No, but seriously, it's hilarious just how on your ass this truck is, and I'm not just talking about the modern stage. In the classic stage, it relentlessly hunts your ass down, and it's fucking intense. They also give Classic this awesome skateboard power-up, which is pretty damn fun to use. Seaside Hill, specifically the modern one, may be my favorite level in the game because it's the one where they designed the most alt paths that truly provide a unique experience in almost every playthrough. Skipping sections by running along the water, driving go-karts on a higher path, or doing some neat platforming on the lower end. The classic version I thought was pretty fun too. Crisis City Act 1 might be my favorite classic level in the game, however. I think it just has the most fun amount of platforming for me. And that bit where it psychs you out at the goal is just hilariously diabolical. You guys have no idea how many times I've replayed this stage as a kid, thinking that I could make that goal if I was just a little bit faster, but like most of my hopes and dreams, I wasn't fast enough to catch it. Moderns was also pretty good. Rooftop Run feels like a near perfect recreation of the stage in Unleashed. Classics was really fun too. Getting able to climb up the clock tower was really cool, as well as venture through the underground section with all the barrels and shit. And then there's Planet Wisp, oh fuck me. Easily the worst stage in the game for both classic and modern. For a plethora of reasons, but for me, it's the very repetitive and dull usage of the Wisp powers, and pretty basic linear and boring 2D sections in the modern levels. And it especially sucks as it's the last level of the whole game. If there's a big problem I have with the levels, it'd be how painfully easy it is to get an S rank in these stages. The game practically hands them to you, so they almost feel meaningless. I spent like 8 or 9 minutes on Planet Wisp, and these motherfuckers still gave me an S. Anyway, the levels for the most part were a ton of fun, and are designed incredibly well. The bosses in this game aren't half bad either. I know I mentioned the ones that are representing the 3 eras, but there are also little rival battles as well, where you face off against Metal Sonic, Shadow, and Silver respectively. The Metal Sonic fight sees you engage in a neat recreation of the race from Sonic CD, but work to be a bit more intuitive, where you dodge various obstacles and have to be on the lookout for various attacks from Metal, and it's really fun. Shadow's fight sees you race against him on the Space Colony Arc for these 2 orbs. When either Sonic or Shadow collects these orbs, they perform a powerful attack, Sonic's being a powered-up boost, and Shadow throwing Chaos Spears for you to look out for. This one, in retrospect, is just okay to me. It is fun to race against Shadow, but it is fairly simplistic with not much beyond my brief description. Silver's fight was really damn fun, and probably the best of the rival battles. Having to chase him down as he uses various psychic attacks was really damn cool. Needing to homing attack the various things he picks up or race across a row of cars he tries to throw at you was so fucking fun. Not to mention the giant trash ball he tries to crush you with. This was just a really solid ass boss fight. Ha! Take that, you pot-headed bitch! And rings were pretty sparse throughout the fight, so you consciously have to watch out to not use up all of your boost. I don't know if it was designed that way intentionally, but I dug it a lot. Maybe I'm alone in this, but it always really bothered me that Modern Sonic got 2 rival fights, while Classic only got 1. Come on, I don't think a Mecha Sonic fight would have been too much to ask for, right? Now for the main bosses. The first boss of the game sees you face off against the Death Egg robot from Sonic 2. It starts off with a fun recreation of the OG fight, and holy shit, this thing is massive. No, like seriously, it was not this fucking big in Sonic 2, what the hell, Eggman? Anyway, the fight starts off with a fun recreation of the old boss, except where you need to now find a way to maneuver under it and attack it from behind, before the fight continues in this big arena where you need to get it to hit these bombs in order to attack it. Pretty simple, but it is the first boss, so I don't really mind as much, and I do find it to just be a really fun and great escalation from the OG fight in Sonic 2. The next boss sees you fight Perfect Chaos, where you must boost through the decimated ruins of Station Square in order to reach his head to attack him. This fight was fucking sick. Not having the super form and having to dodge his attacks, as well as the addition of some pretty interesting platforming sections, made this one so much fun to blast through. The next boss after him is none other than the Egg Dragoon from Sonic Unleashed. This one they had to get real creative with, as now Sonic doesn't have the Werehog form. The fight just has you chase him down to land as many hits as possible, with him throwing plenty of stuff your way like these blasts you'll have to look out for, or to straight up try to crush your ass. This boss fucking ruled, man. It's just so damn fun. Especially during the freefall section and trying to make it onto these rails to catch up to him quicker. I don't know what else there is to say, man. This is just fucking awesome. Unfortunately, the game does end on a pretty massive stinker, and I'm talking bigger than the shit pile left behind from Planet Wisp. I didn't think Wisps had a digestive tract. That's not what I meant! Wait, do they have a digestive tract? Do they shit? Do they piss? Fuck, now you got me doing it! Easily a top contender for the worst final boss in the entire franchise, the Time Eater. Without going into too much detail with the story, not like it matters anyway, the fight sees you controlling Super Sonic. No, not both of them, as you'll just be boosting with Modern Sonic 99.9% of the time, as you face off against the Time Eater controlled by Dr. Eggman and his classic counterpart. The idea of 2 Super Sonics facing off against 2 Eggmen is on paper pretty damn cool, but the fight is honestly just so lame. You're literally just slowly and tediously holding the boost button, waiting to get in closer to hit it. I'd have more fun putting the controller up my ass and playing it that way. It does occasionally switch things up by attacking once or twice, and switching to a 2D section where they kind of just do more of the same thing. It stops time at a few points. That's kind of it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, man. This fight fucking blows. What doesn't, however, is the music. In this game, we're blessed with outstanding remixes of some of the Sonic series' most beloved songs. I genuinely love how they treated the music in this game, because I think it would be very easy for them to have just provided very basic remixes and whatnot, but no. They went the extra mile to not only provide some cool modernized versions of these tracks, some that even feel like the perfect reflection of all the tones and styles the Sonic series has had up to this point. But they also got some songs and tracks that aren't even from the main series and remixed them just because. Tracks from the advanced games, Sonic Battle, Knuckles Chaotix, etc. Easily, my favorite and probably the most iconic remix of the game would be Classic City Escape. As I said a bit ago, it's just a perfect reflection of all the different styles the Sonic series has taken. But I also love stuff like the remix of For True Story in the Shadow boss fight, the title screen remix of the OG Sonic 1 title screen, Modern Chemical Plant, This Game Stardust Speedway, the Death Egg Robot theme, Open Your Heart, Classic Speed Highway, the Silver Fight, you get it. The songs in this game rocked. Something that can be said about Sonic Generations is that it's short as shit, but honestly I think that's fine. This game and even Shadow Generations proves that a game doesn't have to be aggressively long for it to be good. This game can be beat in a good 4 to 5 hours, but it's all the stuff that's within those 4 to 5 hours that makes it worthwhile to come back and play again. Whether it be addicting gameplay, sick level design, or even some of the side content. Yeah, something that I find to be a tad underrated for this game are the little side challenges they have to offer. Within the stage, there are various challenges to do alongside or against Sonic's friends, and they're really cool. I never paid much attention to these as a kid, because I sucked at them, but these range from racing a hologram Sonic to the finish line, having a music battle with Vector the Crocodile, using your sexual charms to seduce these robots with Rouge the Bat, yes, I'm being serious, and it's all honestly pretty fun, and as some neat little incentive, each challenge grants you stuff, whether it be concept art or music from the various games in the series. To circle back to the music, something that's cool is that you have the option to switch what song you want to hear in the level. An option I never made use of growing up on this game, but I absolutely love all the same. On top of those, there are also collectible red rings hidden throughout the stages, which further incentivizes replayability, as these are pretty neatly hidden and fun to try and find.
One more word. Please give me one.
Gubernatorial.
Now for the story. It's pretty non-existent. And I mean that with no exaggeration. This story literally doesn't have dick all to talk about. The idea behind this story, as I said earlier, is just something I've grown less fond of over time. The transition between the classic and 3D games wasn't meant to be a showing of the characters getting older with their new designs. It was just that. New designs for the characters. Passing Classic Sonic off as Sonic's younger self is just kinda dumb to me. They'd technically be the same age, and it also doesn't help that Classic Sonic kinda looks like shit in 3D. Part of the reason why the designs were changed in the first place is because of how awkward these characters would look in 3D with their stubby and chubby proportions. And this game just proved that, funnily enough. Alright, enough about the idea. The story itself is pretty lackluster. The game centers around going throughout Sonic's history, but the story never really does anything with that. They acknowledge how maybe 1 or 2 stages look familiar, and then the rest of the story is just bland cutscenes with characters expositing about what's going on before pushing forward to the next level. That's it. It's a shame because while I don't think it could have been phenomenal, there is potential in just having a really simple and fun story here. One where we reflect on Sonic's life and the dozens of adventures he's had, and the future adventures Classic Sonic will embark on, and all the friends he'll eventually meet. It could have as well given us the opportunity to see a few returning characters like Chip from Unleashed, Tikal, or maybe Shara or something, I don't know. It's as well surprising as to how little of a role Sonic's friends play in this game. The game centers around you saving them, but it was another missed opportunity, I feel, to properly convey what these guys mean to Sonic and vice versa. Unfortunately, this game was released during the era where a majority of folks found Sonic's larger cast to be stupid and pointless, so unless you're Sonic, Tails, or Eggman, you ain't getting jack shit. Which normally wouldn't be too terrible, honestly, but in a game like this, I feel like these guys should have had a bigger presence here. The writing is fine, I guess. Again, there's not much to really go over, but as far as characterization goes, this is a bit of a far cry from how I prefer certain characters to be handled. Sonic and Tails kind of feel like a generic hero and sidekick duo after the writing shift introduced in Sonic Colors, which I'm not really fond of. And everyone else, well, they just existed. The little stuff we do get is just them being boiled down to their most basic traits, removing a lot of the nuances that made them entertaining to begin with. It'll always bother me that for some reason they were so damn committed to having Classic Sonic not talk. At first, it would make sense if you're trying to reflect the fact that he comes from the Genesis era, where he couldn't talk because technology was limited back then. But then it doesn't make much sense when you take into consideration that both Classic Tails and Classic Eggman are allowed to talk. So what the hell gives? The voice work in this game is not that good. I'll never go out of my way to hide the fact that I'm not a fan of some of the modern voices for these characters, especially when a lot of their predecessors were as good as they were. Roger Craig Smith does not fit Sonic the Hedgehog at all, in my opinion. Kate Higgins, however, continues to prove to be a pretty good Tails after her introduction in Sonic Colors, and Mike Pollock continues to kill it as Eggman. However, this game introduces a few new faces to the Sonic cast. Well, if you don't count freeriders anyway. This game is where Cindy Robinson makes her debut as Amy, and I'm not really a fan of the direction she was given in this game. She sounds more Minnie Mouse than Amy Rose. Travis Willingham is brought in as Knuckles, who just sounds like a softer Dan Green, which is pretty cool, I guess. Cream's voice was pretty good. Karen Strassman sounds pretty good as Rouge, if not a tad too seductive in a few areas, but still. The dude they got for Espio sounds so fucking boring. Like, Espio's supposed to have a bit of gruffness to him. Here he's just a guy. Shut the hell up! This game also has Kirk Thornton as Shadow the Hedgehog, and...
You've got this, Sonic!
No. Blaze sounds alright, Silver sounds alright, Vector sounds alright, and Charmy was pretty good. Yeah, the voices in this game, for the most part, are pretty solid, but some of these guys, in my opinion, don't match up to those that came before. Overall, Sonic Generations is an absolutely phenomenal game, and easily one of the best in the Sonic series. With amazing level design, incredibly addicting gameplay that greatly recaptures the classics, as well as providing even greater evolution for a fun new gameplay style, amazing music, and really damn fun boss fights. The story may have been non-existent, but when the game's this good, I just really don't care. Overall, Sonic Generations is a damn near masterpiece.
But we ain't done with Sonic Generations. Yeah, we actually got to talk about the remaster in this 2-pack bundle. The remaster provided to us in Sonic X Shadow Gens is fine.
As I alluded to earlier, I personally don't consider this much of a remaster, as it is just a really good port. Normally, remasters would try to go out and update the visuals to meet the standards of the time they're released. But the Sonic Gens remaster looks damn near the same as it did all those years ago. Which isn't a terrible thing per se, as even though I didn't mention it, Generations is an absolutely breathtaking game when it comes to its visuals, in my opinion. Not much needed to be done, but I feel like something would have been appreciated, at least for me. Well, maybe I should be glad they didn't try to do anything with the visuals after the whole Sonic Seizures fiasco. In terms of additional stuff this remaster added, this is the first time, on console anyway, you can play Sonic Gens at a smooth 60 FPS and with minimal load times. And as a console player, I am very appreciative of this. Especially with those load times, because the OG version would take quite a bit of time to load things. And there are also these new hidden chows spread throughout each of the levels. I haven't gotten them all, but I think all they do is chill in front of the level you find them in the white space. It's an okay addition, which is just another thing to add a bit of replay value, so I can't really complain. Another neat thing is the remapping of the controls to fit the scheme of recent titles like Frontiers or Shadow Gens. Like, for example, if you're on the PlayStation, the boost button would normally be on square in the OG, but for the remaster they remapped it to be like Frontiers, where the boost is now on the RT button. But they also give you the option to switch back to those legacy controls, which I find to be pretty neat. They didn't have to go that extra mile, but it is appreciated that they put in that much detail for the sake of consistency between the two games here. Something else I almost forgot to bring up is the inclusion of the drop dash for both classic and modern Sonic. Sega's been dig-riding the hell out of this move since Mania dropped. The reason I almost forgot to mention it is because it's kinda useless in this game. Like I said, Classic's controls aren't as snappy and responsive as they should be for a move like that to be performed properly. And with Moderns, not only are traditional boost levels in this game not made for it in mind, it's also pretty awkward to pull off, so I just end up not using it at all for this game. It's not a terrible addition, but it ain't that good of one either. And the biggest elephant in the room in regards to new additions are the reworked cutscenes. For whatever reason, Sega decided it would be best to rewrite and rework some of the game's cutscenes and dialogue. And the additions are okay at best and downright pointless at worst. The helm of these rewrites is none other than Ian Flynn, and as I said, it's just fine. There's really not much you could add in terms of dialogue that would make the story of Sonic Gens any better, so the stuff he does add doesn't ruin anything for me, but they don't make it any better either. So I'm just left wondering why add anything new at all. Stuff like Modern Sonic actually talking and responding to his rescued friends, instead of just standing there awkwardly silent, is a tad appreciated, even if some of Sonic's responses don't make that much sense sometimes.
helped me, Sonic. I'll be sure to return the favor next time around.
Not really worrying about that right now, Amy.
Sonic, she's just saying she'll return the favor. Why are you being a dick about it? Yeah, the funniest part of some of these rewrites and added dialogue is that they never change some of the animations. So sometimes the new lines just end up not fitting. In OG Gens, when a classic Sonic rescues Knuckles, he says this.
Thanks, Sonic. You did a good job back there. Hey, did you gain weight?
In which Classic rubs his belly in embarrassment. But in the new one, Knuckles' line was changed to this.
Thanks, Sonic. Now then, tell me, where is the rest of my island?
But they never changed Classic's animation, so he just rubs his belly still. In an implication that his fat ass ate the whole damn island. Yeah, it's funny, but it's also really damn stupid. This is an example of an addition that feels super pointless, cause what was wrong with the original line? And if you're gonna change something like that, at least change Classic's animation to have it match, for fuck's sake. That's not all. They also went through the lengths of re-recording and redubbing certain lines in these cutscenes, and they're alright. They mainly annoy the fuck out of me because some of these lines don't match up at all. Some of the voice direction is somehow worse than it was over a decade ago. And there are several moments where they add way too much to the point where it feels like these folks are speed reading to make it all fit.
It was great teaming up with you. Hope you learned a few tricks that'll help you out in the future. I mean, the past. You know what I mean. It was great teaming up with you, or me. Maybe this will fast-track you to learning some new tricks in the future. Wait, I mean, past. Ugh, time travel's a chore.
Who in their right goddamn mind thought it was a good idea to make him talk that much? Something else that bothers me with this game and Ian Flynn's writing in general is the very unnatural and forced references. And I know what most people are gonna say, that this is a game celebrating the history of Sonic, and it makes the most amount of sense for there to be references here.
And I'd almost agree with that if it wasn't for the fact that Flynn's references often feel super forced and unnatural. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my Frontiers video, but I don't typically hate when Flynn does these kind of references. In the IDW comics, they're treated with a good amount of subtlety. Well, for the most part, at least. But I don't know what it is with the games where he throws that subtlety out of the window faster than a prom night dumpster baby or some shit.
Stuff like him throwing in a reference to the Time Stones from Sonic CD in of itself isn't bad, and as a Sonic CD fan, I did appreciate it. But I hate how it's treated as something only us longtime fans will understand, without taking into account the dozens of people who'll be playing this game and not know what the fuck those things are. Like the references in Frontiers, it feels like pointless fan service. Like the niggas actively reaching through the screen trying to give fans a nostalgic jerk session. Again, references on their own isn't an issue for me. It's how they're done that I have a problem with. Like, I preferred when Sonic and Tails only had a vague recollection of places like Green Hill and Chemical Plant in OG Gens, but in the new one, they know these places by fucking heart. I don't know, it's just less interesting to me. I do like how they mentioned South Island, though, because it felt like we went years with only Green Hill being the only important level from Sonic 1, despite it being attached to a whole-ass island, but I digress. I need to preface that this isn't something that genuinely bothers me, but rather just kinda irks me. And part of the reason why is because when playing for the first time, I tried to view it from the lens of, how would this feel if it was released 13 years ago? As in, if we got this writing in OG Gens. And honestly, it would be alright, but at the same time, considering that this is a remaster, and OG Gens has been digitally delisted across most major platforms, and Sega is hell-bent on this version being the one people play, I feel like that's still grounds to critique what we have here currently. Some people try to defend this by saying that OG Gens referenced past games as well, and yeah, they're not wrong. OG Gens had like one or two references to the Storybook games and Sonic Colors.
No stranger than rescuing genies in magic books or saving aliens in an interstellar amusement park. I'm more concerned about finding our friends.
But those worked purely because the games they referenced came very recently at that point, instead of feeling like pandering like the new version does. Not to mention, this stuff wasn't always back-to-back. Again, this isn't something that makes the story of Sonic Gens worse, but it still just kinda annoys me. Another weird change they made is completely removing the surprise of having classic Eggman in the game, by showing him way earlier instead of only at the end. This is another thing that just feels like, why? I don't really get the point in changing something like this. It really adds nothing. Okay, this next bit is a nitpick, but I find it weird this rewrite kinda tries to erase the fact that the Time Eater has control over time and space. Like in OG Gens, they made it a point to say that this primordial being that Eggman randomly stumbled across has the capabilities of erasing time and space. Meanwhile, in the new one, they just say it can go through time. Again, it's not a major thing, but I just find it to be a weird change. Okay, let's talk about Amy. Easily, the most notable character to be affected by the new stuff is Amy Rose, where they tone down her usual antics, and I honestly don't mind. Like, some of the animation changes just look awkward as fuck, but by and large, I don't mind some of the stuff changed for her here. Stuff like her trying to hug Sonic but being pushed away is changed to her trying to poison him with these cupcakes. People will say otherwise, but look at her fucking face, she looks psychotic. And her line about flirting with Sonic was changed in that clip I showed earlier. Amy's borderline obsessive love for Sonic is something that I'm personally not fond of, and I'll go more into that in a separate video. But I don't mind them trying to rework some stuff to fit her more modern interpretations. Even the end cutscene where she originally knocks Knuckles into a tree was changed to her just aggressively pushing him to the side. I think it works better because A, Knuckles doesn't look like a fucking tool, and B, it still shows her aggressiveness about Sonic that doesn't feel overblown in my opinion. Something else in regards to Amy I do want to bring up is them tweaking her bio to suggest her love for Sonic isn't much of a priority anymore. This is the one thing I'm really mixed on because Amy's love for Sonic, for me, is fine so long as it's subdued. That over-the-top obsessive shit was just never fun to me. But going out and try to remove that part of her character entirely is just weird as hell, not gonna lie. At most, the only things these changes would annoy me is going back to an old game and changing stuff like this is just kinda not good in my opinion. I understand why and don't really mind, but going back to old things and trying to correct stuff like this, without preserving what it was originally like, just doesn't sit right with me. But anyway, back on track. The voice work in this remaster is okay. A lot of the voices sound a tad worse in my opinion, but a good chunk of that could be down to poor direction, as I said earlier. I still don't like Roger's Sonic, though I'm thankful they went back to his normal direction, as opposed to having Sonic sounding like a 40-year-old man like in Frontiers. Colleen O'Shaughnessy replaces Kate Higgins as the Two Tails, and unfortunately I don't think she's as good here. Namely, I don't think she does a good job discerning between her modern and classic Tails voices. Mike Pollock as well isn't as good in that regard either, honestly. Cindy Robinson sounds absolutely amazing as Amy here. Dave B. Mitchell still sounds kinda weird as Knuckles to me. Blaze sounds alright. Silver sounds a bit off this time around. SBO, in my opinion, sounds a little bit better, I guess. Vector sounds the same, which is pretty good. And Colleen is the one actually doing the Charmy voice. And I think it sounds a little bit too much like Tails for my liking. But as it stands, it's fine, I guess. Now let's see how Kirk's Shadow is doing.
On your feet.
Yay, redemption!
Yeah, the remaster part of this bundle is just okay. It's literally just Sonic Generations, so there's not really that much to complain about. The additions with the dialogue and cutscenes are either passable at best or pointless at worst. But again, it's Sonic Generations, there really isn't that much story to ruin there. All in all, the Sonic portion of this Generations pack was a frickin' blast. Now onto the real reason we're all here. So get your special sock and Vaseline healing jelly out, Shadow fans, because it's gonna get good.
The new Shadow Generations portion of this game is yet another entry in the Boost genre of Sonic games, but also taking a few cues from the likes of Sonic Frontiers and introducing an open zone hub world as Shadow's white space. Before getting into that, I feel the need to preface what Shadow Generations even is. Shadow Gens is basically a game that serves as a secondary campaign to Sonic Generations, with both stories happening concurrently. Much like Sonic Generations celebrating and having you venture through Sonic's history, Shadow Generations is all about our favorite Black Hedgehog and looking back on his history, and thankfully they do more with that premise here than Sonic Gens. The gameplay formula for Shadow Generations isn't too dissimilar to Sonic Generations. Play through 2 acts, do some challenges to unlock a boss, beat the boss before continuing on. Like I said, this game offers another open zone experience like Frontiers. And dare I say, I think I dig the Whitespace hub world more than any of the islands in Frontiers. Namely, it's actually distinct and doesn't feel like generic biomes. All of the platforming elements actually feel like they belong here, and are actually pretty fun to run around and go through. And I don't even hate the islands in Frontiers. I'm just saying this to show the clear improvements they've made from the previous game in almost record time. To take it even further than that, the open zone has various collectibles that range from lore drops, depicting Shadow's life up to this point, some songs, and even concept art, which is pretty neat. There are even little side missions that further incentivizes exploring the area. Too bad the reward for doing so was kinda dog shit, but I digress. And they actually did what I hoped for after Frontiers, and provided some NPCs to make the world feel more lively. Now, the characters you talk to only ever provide different tidbits of lore and such, and not really branch into little side quests like I had hoped, but the way they are written and the small little dialogue bits they have are all pretty cute and charming. They also have a few challenges that range from collecting a set number of rings, chasing after clocks and stuff, and while minuscule and relatively simple, they are pretty fun. And honestly, if they were to do more open zone challenges like Frontiers did, I'd like to have more that are like these. Ones that are time-based and actually require stuff like platforming and interacting with the open zone. There are also platforming segments that make good use of Shadow's new abilities that I'll get into in just a bit. But like I said, they add just a few more fun sections to the world. The way Shadow controls in this game is absolutely incredible. Another improvement from Frontiers is that they actually went and properly designed the way Shadow controls, as opposed to just saying fuck it and having the player customize every little thing, which is something I praised Frontiers for, but the more I thought about it, and this game just further proves it, leaving all the physics stuff in the hands of the player really just leaves little room for having well-designed physics and levels to accommodate those physics, if that makes sense. Like, I can't imagine the level design in this game being as fun to play if the devs took an every which way approach to take into account the various ways people would customize their controls, but rather actually properly design Shadow's physics to fit perfectly within the levels they crafted. I hope to God I'm explaining this shit in a coherent way. His controls aren't exactly perfect, however. Something that annoyed me off jump is that Shadow doesn't carry his momentum when jumping. In this game, it's not that big of a deal, but it is still something that bothered me when first popping it on. That and the air boost is pretty weak. You don't gain that much distance, and I think I may know why that's the case, and I'll get into that in just a bit. But I can't help but feel super restricted when I'm doing one of the challenges or something. But all of that stuff, while notable, doesn't really end up mattering in the end, because the game's just so damn fun. Other than that stuff, Shadow is so buttery smooth and responsive to the controls. Another disservice to myself for playing Shadow gens before revisiting Sonic gens is noticing just how more sluggish and unresponsive the controls are at times in that game. And that's not even a dig at gens, it's still a phenomenal game, but it's more so to say how much of an improvement the controls and response time has seen since that game's release. The level design in Shadow gens is just godly. Like Sonic Generations, each level is split into two acts, one being primarily 3D and the other 2D, and the level design for both are so damn good. Not only are there plentiful amounts of alt routes for you to explore, the way the devs implemented them makes the game so much fun to come back and replay. And the best way for me to go over this is to go over Shadow's new abilities in this game. For years, I've been so frustrated with certain games making Shadow a Sonic clone in terms of gameplay. Because of all the crazy shit Shadow is able to do, relegating him to being exactly like Sonic is just super lame and feels like a waste of potential to me. But when I saw we'd be able to use Shadow's chaos powers, I lost my shit. In a slight distinction from Sonic's homing attack, they gave Shadow his Chaos Snap ability, depicting him blitzing from one enemy to another. It's basically another homing attack, but with a minor effect to differentiate it, but I love that they went ahead and did that. Then there's Chaos Spear, which is basically used to stun enemies, or help with certain obstacles. It works well enough for what it is, but I feel like it would have been cooler if it could actually destroy enemies instead of stun them. Because most enemies don't even require stunning, as you can either homing attack or boost through them. It's a minor thing, but something I felt would have been cooler. The next one is the iconic Chaos Control. You fill it by destroying enemies, and once activated, it stops time for 5 seconds. And this move is so fucking cool because of how versatile it is. You can use it during some of the boss fights to get more hits in, or you can use it during various environmental hazards to find alternate routes, like jumping over these trains in Rail Canyon, or homing attacking these boulders the Death Egg Robot throws at you in Sunset Heights. There's also this move called the Chaos Dash, that when Chaos Control is activated, will allow you to blitz through the level to find alternate paths for collectibles, or just to find shortcuts throughout the levels. Shadow's Chaos powers are sick as hell, but what makes them better is how they work in tandem with Shadow's new Doom powers. Without going into detail with the story just yet, Shadow's Doom powers are abilities he acquires due to the return of his old enemy, Black Doom. And the way these powers enhance the playstyle tremendously cannot be understated. You have the Doom Spears, which is basically an upgraded Chaos Spear. You also have the Doom Wings that allow you to glide throughout the levels, making it easier to reach certain routes and dash through enemies. This is what I meant when I brought up why the air dash feels a tad limited, because they likely wanted the Doom Wing to be a priority instead of you dashing forward uncontrollably. Doom Blast, which is my personal favorite, allows you to knock enemies in various directions, which again is another way to find hidden areas and such. as well as make certain shortcuts, which is sick as hell. If there's a problem I do have, it's that it often takes a bit too much control away from you, in that it'll often auto-aim and lock onto the area you want to go to, instead of giving the player the freedom of looking around and seeing what path you want to take. As well as the fact the move where you zip to the enemy after you launch them is unnecessarily automated. I'd like to teleport to them at my own pace instead of having the game do it for me, but it's honestly whatever because it's still fun to use. The next ability is Doom Surf, which allows you to surf across water, and it's pretty cool. And finally, Doom Morph, the biggest skill check in the game for most players. I was shocked to see how many folks hated this one. Honestly, it's pretty damn fun. It does have a bit of a learning curve the game doesn't tell you much about, which is unfortunate, but when getting the hang of it, it is pretty fun. It's mainly used on this gooey, sticky terrain and adds little fun mechanics to the playstyle, like swinging and even some neat little platforming additions. These abilities even make traveling across the open zone fun as hell. Soaring through the skies with the Doom Wings, surfing across the water is all really fun. And even the different ways you get to reach the various boss gates are so unnecessarily fun. The powers in Shadow's arsenal and how they're used in this game quickly make it one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in a Sonic game. Using Chaos Control to reach these rails before they're destroyed to find a shortcut, using it while activating Doom Blast on this enemy to skip over the water section in Kingdom Valley, or using Doom Blast on this Death Egg robot, all just some good shit. While talking, I've primarily had the 3D levels in mind when discussing this stuff, but the 2D levels are cool too. Like Sonic Generations, they aren't as fun as the 3D stuff, but they are still some of the best 2D sections we've had in the Boost games. Firstly, I love how they play into the 2.5D angle, by giving us really cool and dynamic camera angles, to the point where most of the time I forget that I'm even playing a 2D stage. But the level design, and especially the platforming, is just so addictingly fun, especially when trying to find alt routes, which aren't as plentiful as I'd hoped, but they're still fun as hell regardless. The level design and utilization of the Doom and Chaos powers work in tandem to be some of the most genuinely fun and well-designed stages and gameplay in the Sonic series. To go over the levels we have featured here, since this game is all about Shadow's history, first up we have the Space Colony Arc from Sonic Adventure 2. Then we have Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes, Sunset Heights from Sonic Forces, and Chaos Island from Sonic Frontiers, okay, random, and finally Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2. Strangely, in a game that's all about Shadow's history, it's surprising at how there's not a single level from Shadow's own game here. Like, they had fucking Chaos Island in this bitch, the worst island in Frontiers before something like Black Comet. It doesn't even make sense for it to be here. Shadow wasn't even in Frontiers. Before anyone says the games are about time travel, I fucking know that, but at least places like Sunset Heights make sense because Shadow was fucking there. It'd be like if in Sonic Generations, instead of Crisis City, they put in something like Sky Troops from Shadow 05. Why? He doesn't even go there! The real answer is more than likely Sega wanting to reuse assets they had lying around to make the game a bit longer. And honestly, that's fine. Especially with what they do with it, as I'll get into in just a bit. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like this isn't a weird choice. Anyway, there are noticeably less stages here than in Sonic Generations. But that doesn't mean there's less fun, however. To briefly go through them individually, the Space Colony Arc works as a pretty fun introductory level. Decent way to introduce you to the base mechanics and stuff like Chaos Control. There aren't that many places for alt paths, but there is this one room that really opens up and is really fun to run around and see which kind of path you want to take. But something about it is halfway through, Black Doom activates his domain expansion like,
Hey! Wanna see something cool?
Yeah, okay.
Domain expansion.
and sends your ass to Radical Highway in this smooth-ass transition cutscene. He does that a lot in this game. No, seriously, why is his domain expansion Radical fucking Highway of all places? That would have been a cool way to bring in Black Comet or something because A, that makes more sense, and B, by the time we actually do get to the Radical Highway stage, it kinda loses its luster. Anyway, it provides a fuck ton of cool visuals and spectacle the Sonic series hasn't seen, which is cool as fuck. And Act 2 was pretty fun. Level design-wise, it is pretty basic, but I think they make up for it towards the middle point. This stage is what introduces you to the Doom Wings. And as I brought up, they're sick as hell. Rail Canyon is pretty cool too. Again, the ways they allow you to play around with Chaos Control was really fun. Being able to skip over sections like this, or finding a shortcut over this train here was really fun to try and find the first go around. The Radical Highway section was pretty decent as well. The thing that stuck out to me for this level, and the levels in general for this game, is that they're pretty damn beefy. After the Radical Highway section is over, we get back to Rail Canyon, and the level goes on for like an extra 2 minutes. I personally feel like the ideal length for a Sonic level should be about 3 to 5 minutes, or at least in that time frame. And these stages often meet that for me, which I found to be neat. And I need to preface that I don't want 5 minutes of straight bullshit. I need stuff like engaging gameplay and fun platforming and obstacles and stuff, and Rail Canyon and a lot of the other levels here have that down packed. The level design for the most part is pretty solid, especially in the 2D stage. Being able to switch the rails and take these various routes were pretty neat. Finding this lower part underneath the tracks was also kinda cool too. Rail Canyon was just a solid level in my eyes. Kingdom fucking Valley. Holy fucking shit. How much they cooked with this stage cannot be understated. Utilizing the Doom Blast gets you to some really cool sections of the level, on top of them providing these neat ways to find little collectibles and such. My favorite being if you use Chaos Control at the right time in this section of Act 2, before these platforms reach a certain point, you can hop on them to get a collectible for the open zone. Shit like that is just sick as hell, because it's entirely dependent on the player, as opposed to them just handing shit to you like they've done in the past. The 2D version was probably the stage that won me over on the 2D in this game, because they had a few neat little platforming sections that were really fun, and like I said, a great utilization of Chaos Control. Sunset Heights was a fucking blast too. Not too much I can say without repeating myself. Level design's pretty good, utilizing Shadow's powers was really fun, but the Radical Highway section kicked every ounce of ass imaginable. They get really damn creative with these sections. They play around in this grind rail bit, and even the 2D sections are really fun and engaging. The 2D one was really damn fun. Trying to evade these Death Egg robots. This cool little underground section where you can use Chaos Control to try and beat the water is pretty neat. This underground section in general was just really fun to play around in. I haven't mentioned it, but these last two levels have utilized Doom Surf quite a bit, and it's pretty damn fun, honestly. Chaos Island is where the game really tries to shake things up with introducing and utilizing Doom Morph as its main gimmick. And it's crazy they actually went and made Chaos Island fun to play. This might be my second favorite stage in the game, honestly. Once you get the hang of it, the Doom Morph is pretty fun. But not just that, this level is also expertly designed with these alt paths. And the way you can use Doom Morph to reach certain areas is just so damn fun. The 2D one isn't as fun in my opinion, but still pretty damn solid. Radical Highway might be my favorite level in the game. I know I said it loses its luster by the time we get here because of how much it was used before, but ending off the game with Shadow's first level ever in Sonic Adventure 2 is just too thematically satisfying for me to outright dislike it. Not to mention, the level is also just masterfully designed. It properly introduces the Doomwing mechanic, and fuck me is it so fun to fly around these obstacles and shit. The alternate paths are so fun to explore. The platforming as well is just fucking phenomenal. This is the only level in the game that doesn't have a 2D variant, and honestly, I think I love it more because of that. Like Doom was right, this level just fucking rocks. The stages in general for this game are absolutely incredible. Easily some of the best in the franchise, tackled together with some of the best gameplay in this series, makes for an unforgettable experience. But that ain't all. We also have the challenges as well. Like Sonic Generations, this game gives you various side challenges to do in order to collect boss keys, which in turn allow you to fight the big bosses in this game, which we'll of course get into in just a second. But my god, the challenges are just something that reinforces how masterful the level design in this game is. These challenges are pretty bite-sized and range from using Chaos Control to evade and stop obstacles and such, make it to the goal with a single ring, Chaos Spear a number of enemies before reaching the goal, collect a set number of rings before reaching the goal, etc. These challenges are fairly simple, but so well designed and so fun that I'm glad a majority of these are mandatory to continue the story, as opposed to Sonic Gens where you really only needed to do one to get just one key. These are some of the most fun platforming stages in any of the recent Boost games for me. And I like how they went out of their way to tweak and rework some of the layouts of the levels to make them feel more unique from the regular stages, just like Sonic Gens. That and the difficulty of some of these feel properly balanced, and not cheap like some of the stuff in Frontiers' Final Horizon. These challenges are just really damn fun. Now for the boss fights. The boss fights kick so much damn ass. For our lineup, we have the Bio Lizard, Metal Overlord, Mephiles the Dark, and of course, Devil Doom. The Bio Lizard fight is a fuck ton of fun. It starts us off with a neat recreation of the boss from SA2, before mutating to sprout these arms for you to look out for. The fight is fairly simple as you just find ways to attack its life support system, but using stuff like Chaos Control and the Chaos and Doom Spears was really damn fun. Metal Overlord was really fucking cool. It involves you doom surfing and knocking debris at him, whilst dodging obstacles. This might be my favorite boss in the game, because it basically has everything I'd want from a Sonic boss fight. Kick-ass spectacle, constant movement, needing to learn precision and timing, etc. The coolest thing about this boss is when you use Chaos Control to get in a hit on Metal, he's just talking shit saying that he can basically do it too.
Use Chaos Control! Ha! That power already belongs to me!
It's minor, but it's pretty damn funny. Especially if you spoke to Omega before the fight where he tries to warn Shadow of this. Yeah, this boss was just a blast. Mephiles the motherfucking Dark. When I saw he was coming back in this game, I lost my shit. I could not wait to see what they did with him. Some could argue that his involvement in the story was wasted, and I wouldn't entirely disagree, but I still love what they did with him here, even if it was very little. I especially love just how the game went about building up to this fight. A little after completing Chaos Island, you're directed to head down to this underground path. But once you enter it, the once ambient and dramatic music of the open zone comes to a stop. You're greeted with pure silence for a few brief seconds before the game starts playing this ominous music, as you're guided through this underground lair hidden off from the rest of the white space. This place isn't like any other in the white space, it's already got all of its color. Not only that, but it's the only place in Sonic and Shadow Generations that's closed off and hidden from the rest of the void. Once you get the means to actually enter the gate, you then get the introductory cutscene, where we finally see him in all of his glory. I would normally save story stuff for after I talk about the gameplay, but considering how little bearing Mephiles has in the story, I feel like it'd be best for me to go over this stuff now. The way this game handled Mephiles, while minor, was so cool. Since he's a being that transcends time, he's fully aware that he's been erased from the timeline due to the ending of Sonic 06. And he tries to take advantage of the Time Eater shenanigans in order to restore himself to the timeline. And he's not fucking around, because he immediately goes for a kill shot at Shadow, by using the same crystal beam he used to kill Sonic. He knows this is his only chance at existing in the timeline, and it's so cool seeing how panicky he gets.
You know, even though Mephiles is an evil prick, I still couldn't help but feel a little bit bad for the guy here. You know, before punching his non-existent teeth in, but still.
Anyway, now for the fight itself. The fight has you use Doom Blast and Doom Morph in order to move around and get various attacks in on Mephiles. And once again, this is just really fun, and using the Doom Blast was sick as hell. Needing to swing around in order to get an attack on him was pretty cool. And watching him transform into this big monster and needing to move around these lasers was really fun. Yeah, the boss, like the previous ones, was just pretty fun. Devil Doom. Devil Doom, for the first half at least, is one of those fights that's basically an amalgamation of all the bosses / techniques and moves you've learned up to this point. And yeah, it was pretty damn cool. You get some cool surfing sections like in the Metal Overlord fight, as well as some fun platforming bits with the Doom Morph power, which kicked my ass on my first go-through, but repeated playthroughs made it more manageable. And then with Phase 2, Black Doom enters his Neo Devil Doom form, as you battle him soaring through the skies with Shadow's Doom Wings, and it's just the coolest shit ever. Honestly, while more fun, this boss does have a bit more issues than the previous ones. Mainly that the game doesn't make it extremely clear how the boss's attacks kinda operate. Doom will throw these blue worms at you, and you're meant to sidestep them in order to shoot them back at him. But it only really works if you're aligned with his giant eyeball nutsack thing, which isn't made exactly clear to the player. He'll even pull out this vortex that you'll have to boost through, but you won't know that you have to try and steer away from the sides, otherwise it'll slow you down, thus removing the opportunity to get an attack on the guy. This stuff isn't anything that ruins the boss. If anything, these make him one of the best of the game. I just wish it was in a situation where certain stuff was better telegraphed to the player. The boss is still really fun, and a kick-ass way to end off the game. All the bosses here are just so damn good. They seem to combine the cool spectacle of frontiers with really intuitive gameplay, which is nice. With the game at several instances going out of its way to properly telegraph certain attacks, which is cool. I feel like some of the bosses like Mephiles or Biolizard could have used some more of that, but regardless, it was still pretty cool. These aren't really all that difficult, which I don't mind. These are just really solid and well done bosses.
Speaking of which, I don't think I've ever been blue-balled harder by a video game, because how do you give me a Shadow the Hedgehog game where we don't fight Sonic? Some people say it makes sense as to why we don't fight him because Shadow loses and whatnot. Have y'all never played a story game with scripted wins or some shit? It could have been possible. But I can tell you who got blue-balled harder than me in this instance. Shadow.
The reason why I don't mind the difficulty is because there's a mode in the game called Doom Zone, and once activated, you can unlock even more challenging versions of the bosses, as well as the various challenges. For the bosses, there were minor changes made, like removing rings, adding more deadly obstacles and stuff like that. And if I'm being honest, a small part of me wishes that the hard versions were the ones we got in the default fight, because they make the already fun bosses just that much more engaging. The Hard Metal Overlord, God, that sounds like a kick-ass rock album. The Hard Metal Overlord fight keeps kicking my ass, but it's really fun to try over and over again for the sake of trying to get an S rank. Speaking of which, in comparison to Sonic Gens, this game actually makes you work to get that S rank. That's not to say it's incredibly difficult to do so, but it will require much repeated playthroughs, which is what I love as it further encourages replayability, which I think is kinda essential for a Sonic game. And as for the challenges, they are kinda just repeats of the normal ones, but redesigned to prove, well, more challenging. Adding more obstacles, taking you to a new part of the level, some even have more strict time limits. And yeah, these are pretty damn fun. The thing with these is that completing them doesn't really get you anything, other than just having more game to play, which I find to be pretty cool. This game is almost the same length as Sonic Gens, but surprisingly doesn't have as much content as said game. Regardless, the stuff they do have here is so worthwhile you could spend so many hours on it and not get bored. The music in this game is absolutely phenomenal. Like Sonic Gens, a majority of the tracks are remasters of the levels featured here. My faves have to be Space Colony Arc and Radical Highway. Not really much I can say beyond these just kick ass and do a really good job at getting you pumped for the level. I haven't played Sonic Heroes, so I really can't speak too much on the Rail Canyon remix, but the Sunset Heights one I thought was pretty good. That level had one of the few decent tracks in Forces, and the remix here was really good. Chaos Island's theme is kinda ass. The techno dubstep angle isn't something I'm against, but it really didn't work for me here, especially when the second half is just so freaking good. It just makes the whole thing feel like a mess. For the individual boss themes, we have a remix of Supporting Me for the BioLizard fight, and god fucking damn! This shit is hard! We have a slight remix of What I'm Made Of for the Metal Overlord fight. I say slight because I can't hear that much of a difference between this and the OG, but regardless, it sounds really good. Mephiles' boss theme from 06 gets remixed here, and it sounds pretty damn cool. But the absolute peak of it all is the goddamn All Hail Shadow remix that plays during the Devil Doom boss. Holy fucking shit!
All hail Shadow, heroes rise again, obliterating everything that's not your friend. Nothing can stop you now, no ghost to bring you down. There's nothing left to lose, you win.
Beyond the level and boss themes, the music they put in the cutscenes are pretty good too. Whether somber, dramatic, or action-oriented, the music here was really good. Not to mention, the white space music being an orchestral version of All Hail Shadow. Nice. The music in this game is just beyond phenomenal. While not as many diverse tracks as Sonic Gens, the stuff we do have here was handled to near perfection, and easily some of the best tracks in recent years for me.
Now let's talk about the story. The story is something I have quite a bit to say about because it's good. Yeah, it's good, but it could have been better. Like, I feel the best way to describe the story of Shadow Gens would be serviceable. Like, it's a fine story for what it is, but I can't help but look at it and see a bunch of missed potential here.
That ain't me saying the story is bad or anything, because like I said, it is good, but there's a bit holding it back from being great in my opinion. Like, if the story just had a bit more meat to it, I'd go as far as to say it's among the best of the series. Firstly, gotta get this out of the way, and this goes for the story and the game as a whole. Presentation-wise, this game looks phenomenal. Graphically, this shit looks damn near flawless, and when we get to the cutscenes, god, the direction, the lighting, the character animation is easily some of the best it's been in a long time. You can tell they put that Frontiers money to good use, because this all just looks absolutely incredible. Despite that game being only 2 years old by this point, all the stuff in Shadow Gens almost completely blows it out of the water in terms of presentation. I just want to bring this up because I don't know when I'll be able to. I find it interesting that, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure someone will correct me, that this game is the first in a long while to use motion capture for a Sonic game's cutscenes. I bring this up because in the past when they have done motion capture, you can kind of tell as certain movements and stuff look a tad more stiff in comparison to when they don't use motion capture in cutscenes. Yet in this game, it seems they managed to naturally blend things in a way to where, yeah, it's noticeable if they are doing motion capture, but the movements are still smooth and fluid. I don't know why I went on that tangent, I just found it interesting. The story automatically has more going for it than Sonic Gens, but unfortunately a lot like Sonic Gens, the story doesn't have as much to really grasp and hold on to as I'd hope. I guess I'd better get into what the story is actually about. The story begins with Shadow aboard the space colony Ark, looking to investigate a biosignature gun detected. While racing throughout the Ark, he encounters Black Doom. After a brief chase, he encounters
the fake Chaos Emerald Tails made to foil the Doctor's plans.
Yeah, that. Before being sent to white space by the Time Eater, just like Sonic and his friends in Sonic Generations. The game then follows Shadow as he encounters Maria and Gerald, sucked in from a point before the Ark disaster. So now Shadow aims to defeat Black Doom and set the timeline straight. If there's something I automatically have a problem with in regards to the story, is that they don't really explain anything. Like, yeah, we know based off of Sonic Gens what's happening here, but we never get any moments in this game's story that sheds any light on things. Especially from Shadow, as he just happens to know this is a weird time void without there being a moment for him to naturally come to that conclusion. I get that it's meant to be a companion story to Sonic Gens, but I feel like we could have gotten a bit more to make things feel properly fleshed out. To add even more to the whole story not explaining stuff thing, Black Doom. The game makes it a point that Black Doom has returned, but they never explain how. He's just back somehow. And not only that, he somehow has this weird dominion over the white space, to where he can accelerate his plans to revive his forces and consume the world. Yeah, we get it. But the game never explains how he can do this shit. Stuff like this feels like such an oversight because I'm just left feeling confused as fuck. Anyway, other than that stuff, the story is, like I said, just fine. The story carries a prominently serious and dramatic tone, which makes sense given the character of Shadow. The story also unfortunately doesn't really live up to the things it sets up. Routinely throughout the game, they set up Black Doom possessing or controlling Shadow, but nothing is ever done with that. When Shadow encounters Gerald and Maria, he ponders on if he can change their fate. Yet for the rest of the story, that goal of his is never brought back up again. Like, there's so much stuff here that could have elevated it for me, but they just don't go the extra mile. It's really carried by the characters and their interactions, so I guess I'll just get into that. They handled Shadow almost perfectly in this game. Throwing Shadow into a whirlwind of his fucked up past was certainly fun to embark on in this game. Automatically, a cause for concern would be them to backpedal on his arc in Shadow 05, where he put his past behind him in favor of making his entire life center around Maria. But they cleverly avoided that, making it a point to emphasize that while he has and will forever have his love and care for her, he still chooses to go his own way to live how he sees fit, but forever carrying her wish in his heart. This is undoubtedly the best Shadow's been portrayed in a long while, as far as the games go at least. No unnecessarily edgy or dickish attitude or over-exaggerated loner tendencies, just a stoic, cold-hearted, kick-ass hedgehog we all know and love. Shadow doesn't really have that much of an arc to speak of in this game. All the story entails is just showing how he handles the past being thrown at him, and I think that was portrayed fairly well. Shadow's reaction to seeing Maria and Gerald was so good. His facial expressions and movements are all so subtle. They don't need to have him become a sobbing mess or anything like that. He moves and acts very calculated, and I love that. However, something that does bother me with how they handle Shadow is that I wish they put in more effort to show how much Shadow's changed since Gerald and Maria last saw him 50 years ago. And I do mean show. If there's a problem I have with Ian Flynn's writing, besides the references,
I found you, Shadow!
The blue hedgehog. Of all places. Well then, it'll be a date to die for.
is that he has a real bad habit of describing how characters are in his stories without really showing it. When talking to the various NPCs in the game, they make several remarks about how different Shadow is, or that he's changed a lot since the events on the Ark 50 years ago, but they never actually show those changes, or really show how different he is. But other than that, I did enjoy seeing a side of Shadow that has been long forgotten for a while. Seeing him almost to the point of panic when losing Gerald and Maria again is nothing short of heartbreaking. That single tear shed absolutely fucking destroyed me, man. Gerald and Maria don't really have that much to offer here. I've seen a bit of discussion on how Maria, for a long time, hasn't had any character besides her connection to Shadow. But I think this game did a good job at remedying this, showing that despite her ailment, she's still a shining light of hope and positivity, even having the balls to stand up against Space Satan over here. Gerald... yeah, this is another thing I take issue with. Gerald in this game was fine, but I can't help but feel like we could have got some more interesting stuff here. It kind of bothers me how this series likes to really hone in and focus on Shadow and Maria's relationship, while kind of disregarding Gerald and what his relationship with Shadow could have been like. We never get a moment in this game, or any other, that dives into Shadow and Gerald's relationship, or even what Shadow thinks of him now, given how Gerald tried to use him as a tool for revenge. I also kind of take issue with the fact that this story never addresses the fact that, yeah, this dude kind of becomes a genocidal maniac at one point. They only ever allude to his demise without talking about the shit that went down after that.
Talking about this story is kind of hard for me because I do like the stuff that's in here. I think Gerald is written pretty well in this story, and the few interactions he has with Shadow are interesting, but he doesn't really do or add that much to the story for me. I almost think it'd be more interesting if they pulled him from a point in time after the Ark disaster. Maybe make it where he's just moments away from being executed. Then he gets pulled into this entire ordeal, seeing Shadow and Maria together, I don't know, something like that would have just been more interesting, I guess.
I feel like with that, we could have gotten some heartfelt moments with him and Maria, as well as him and Shadow. But that's purely just an idea from me. Gerald in this story was fine. Rouge and Omega are also in this story. Kinda. Like, they show up in the story, but they don't really contribute much either. This next bit is going to be a big-ass nitpick, but it really bothers me in the two most recent media to depict these two together, being the Dark Beginnings prologue animation, which I'll get into shortly, and this game, that Shadow never really addresses Omega. Like, he never says his name or acknowledges his presence at all. He just looks at him, and that's kinda it. This is very much a nitpick I have, but I don't know if it's an Ian Flynn thing or a Sega thing, where they just really don't show the kind of dynamic Shadow and Omega have. Based on the cutscene of Shadow first entering the white space, you really wouldn't know that Omega is a trusted ally of Shadow's, and just assume he's a random-ass robot made by Eggman. Then there's Black Doom, who just exists. I'm gonna be honest, all my intrigue and hype surrounding Black Doom's return stemmed from nostalgia and the hope that something actually interesting would be done with him. I always thought he was such a basic bitch villain in Shadow 05, just evil alien conqueror number 54. But in Shadow Generations, he's exactly that again. Nothing about his relationship or interactions with Shadow are all that enticing or interesting. I can see the potential in Black Doom if they chose to bring him back again, but as it stands now, he's just not that interesting of a villain to me. I encourage any diehard Black Doom fan to tell me what it is they love about him so much. I genuinely want to know.
Another thing that irks me in regards to this story just not having a lot to it, despite having a decent amount of characters here, a lot of them just don't really do much. Like, imagine how interesting it'd be to see Shadow and Omega venturing through the white space. We could have some fun banter here and there before they encounter Gerald, Maria, or even Rouge. Hell, a big missed opportunity staring us right in the face. 4 of the most influential people in Shadow's life, all in one place, and yet they never do anything interesting with that. You could have done something interesting like having Rouge and Omega keep watch over Gerald and Maria, while Shadow does his thing going after Black Doom. Maybe have him make snide remarks about Eggman and seeing how Gerald responds to that. I don't know, something. I also just think Omega and Maria interactions would be so damn funny.
This blood-hungry killing machine with this sweet innocent child would undoubtedly be the cause for some fun interactions. Strangely, this game's story had the same problem that Frontiers' story had, where certain elements and character beats are left for these little side things, as opposed to having them be in the actual story. Stuff like Team Dark showing concern for one another, or Gerald growing suspicious of his and Maria's fate, would have worked better had they been implemented into the story proper, in my opinion. Despite my very apparent problems, the characters were all handled pretty damn well. The little dialogues they have in the open zone are all fun and interesting. Omega will forever be a fucking riot. Maria's interactions with Shadow are pretty sweet, and Rouge was really fun to have here too. We have a few more NPCs with the likes of Big the Cat and Norbot and Cubot, these two can kiss my ass, and they're all pretty enjoyable.
To bring up the Dark Beginnings animation prologue, I won't go into detail with how I feel about it here, as I have a planned video for that in the future. Like many of the recent animations tied to upcoming Sonic games, this animation was really fucking good. I don't know who I gotta talk to or whose toes or any other body part I gotta suck to get a whole movie in this style, but I'm telling you, I'll strongly consider doing it. Anyway, I got something I gotta get off my chest when it comes to these. Sega, if you're intent on doing these little prequel animations for every new game release, like I'm pretty sure you are, can you please, for the love of fuck, actually make sure the stories properly line up with each other? 9 times out of 10, the animations are done after a good chunk of the game is already complete, which I don't mind, but from what I assume is either poor planning or poor writing or whatever, some story beats often don't line up correctly.
In Dark Beginnings, Shadow is plagued by these weird and cryptic visions, and as such, he, alongside Rouge and Omega, aim to steal a gunship in order to go to the Ark for answers. But one of the first lines in Shadow Gens' story kinda contradicts this.
I already told you. Gun detected an unusual biosignature aboard the Ark. I'm not leaving until I eliminate any possible threat.
This is nothing short of a nitpick, but I had to get it off my chest because I feel like this is the 3rd time they've done something like this. You can make the assumption that Gunn probably gave him this intel on his way to the Ark, but the way the line's written and said kinda suggests otherwise. Anyway, the writing in this game is fairly solid. They throw in quite a few curveballs that I didn't see coming. Revealing that Shadow threw that fight with Sonic to give him the fake Chaos Emerald was really unexpected, but also something I'm a little mixed on. On one hand, it is a clever utilization of the fake emerald in the story, and a clever workaround that doesn't contradict the events of Sonic Gens. But I also just have a hard time buying that Shadow wouldn't go all out in trying to defeat Sonic by using his Doom powers, especially if it's over something as important as the Chaos Emeralds. Maybe since he had the fake, he thought it'd be an easier out to get Sonic out of his way until he dealt with Black Doom. On top of that, they also added some interesting new lore to the series, like Gerald having 2 sons, as well as Maria having a little sister, which I hope comes back into play at some point in the future. Another thing I'd like to add is that they finally listened and actually put these prequel animations in the actual game, for PlayStation users only, which is pretty fucking dumb, but come on, baby steps. The writing overall in this story was just pretty solid. The emotional moments that naturally arise due to the story of Shadow and Maria were handled almost perfectly, and definitely got me a little teary-eyed. The voice acting in this game is absolutely phenomenal as well. Whether you've seen me discuss it on Twitter, follow me on Twitter at GNB, or in previous videos, I've never hidden the fact that I was never fond of Kirk Thornton's Shadow voice. I never found his voice completely unfitting of the character like I do with Roger Craig Smith's voice for Sonic, but I just prefer others' takes on the character. Guys like David Humphrey and Sonic Prime's Ian Hanlon are examples of what I prefer when it comes to Shadow's voice. I prefer him to sound more relaxed, I'd say, as opposed to sounding super low, deep, and gritty. So far, Keanu Reeves, from the brief lines in the trailers, I think he'll do a great job with Shadow in the third Sonic movie. Kirk to me always sounded too try-hardy for me. His deep, grizzled take on Shadow just never worked for me. However, he absolutely killed it in this game. Getting to hear his Shadow actually show some proper emotion other than cocky or angry really worked in his favor towards making me like his Shadow voice. Is he a great Shadow voice? Nah, not really, but he really did prove himself here. And now I really don't mind him being the Shadow voice for the games. Mike Pollock does a decent job as Gerald, I feel, but I find it very distracting how he doesn't differentiate his Gerald voice at all from how he's done Eggman in recent years.
Something wiped out the ancients, that's for certain. A catastrophic event caused dire environmental shifts across the islands. It appears they made some effort to rebuild, but they were living on borrowed time. They died out within a generation. I believe so, yes. It is time to awaken the ultimate life form. Welcome to the world, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Stephanie Sheh fucking killed it as Maria, holy shit. This is easily the best English voice we've had for the character, in my opinion. Namely for the fact that she sounds less phoned in compared to the others. It just feels the most natural to me. Karen Strassman as Rouge. Okay.
This is another thing that pisses me off with them working on the prequel animation after working on the game, because like with Frontiers' prologue, Knuckles' VA, Dave B. Mitchell, was the best he'd sounded. Just for Frontiers to come out and for him to not sound as good. In Dark Beginnings, Karen Strassman sounded great in my opinion, but because they figured out their direction after recording Shadow Gens, it makes this weird as hell inconsistency to where in the actual game, she sounds horrible.
She sounds like a fucking grandma, dude!
A fine time for you to be honorable. Whatever. Sonic is getting ready to confront the monster that trapped us here.
This is better than how she sounded in Dream Team, but that's not a fucking high bar to beat. Hell, even though the re-recorded lines she did for Sonic Gen, she sounds pretty good. What the fuck? Despite me bringing up my grievances numerous times, I do think Roger sounded pretty decent in Shadow Gens. Yeah, that's all I really got to say about him. The voices for the bosses were all pretty damn good. Ray Chase did a good job as Metal Overlord. Robbie Damon, while not sounding as good as Dan Green in my opinion, did a decent job with Mephiles. And Ben Diskin did an outstanding job as Black Doom.
Yeah, as if this game couldn't get any better. You got Shadow facing off against Cyclops, Spider-Man, and Venom all in one game.
Yeah, the voice work here was really damn solid. As a whole, the story of Shadow Gens is just good.
Despite me being vocal about my many issues, I still think this story is pretty decent. Like I said, the presentation and cutscene animation quality is top fucking notch. That Sonic and Shadow fight is easily some of the best in-game animation we've had in this franchise, bar none. But I don't know, I feel like there was just a bit more that could have been done here for me to see it as truly great like so many others do. But maybe that's just me expecting a bit too much for the kind of game Shadow Gens is. It's basically an expansion on a decade-old game, and maybe me expecting them to go the extra mile for the story just a bit much. But regardless, I still found the story to be pretty good.
Overall, Shadow Generations is a near-perfect video game, with absolutely breathtaking visuals and presentation, easily the best-looking game in the series graphically anyway, incredibly addicting gameplay, with stellar level design that's fun and encourages exploration. The Doom powers are super fun and intuitive, probably the best implementation of a gameplay gimmick in a Sonic game for me. Really fun boss fights, incredible music, and a pretty decent story. Shadow Generations is an easy contender for best game in the franchise.
And to address the title and the thumbnail, is Sonic X Shadow Generations, together, as a bundle, the best 3D Sonic game? I'd say yes. Just these two packaged together makes for such an amazing experience, and any kid would be lucky enough to pick this up as their first Sonic game. But, is Shadow Generations specifically the best 3D Sonic game? Not quite. In terms of gameplay, I think it knocks Unleashed way out of the park. But the story for me is what holds it from taking the spot as my favorite. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This is Darion of GNB Productions, and take care.